So I gave myself 1 month to make a video completely from scratch, and that was my very first sitcom story titled My Cinderella Story, which features me cross-dressing in a big fancy ball gown Cinderella dress, whilst a couple curious figures appear on scene in mysterious outfits and creepy masks whilst they gamble their lives away, and an odd fella who seems to like eating roses. I do not condone this. However, this video is going to tell you about all the hurdles that we had to face in order to reach the final product, and we'll go through the time and the cost that it takes to make a video like My Cinderella Story and prove to you that you can do it too. So, where do we start? So, there is a lot for us to talk about, especially when it comes to all of our learning curves. There is such a long list of them, however, I'm probably not going to go through all of them. Rather, I will compress them into 5 major points of production, those being special effects and props, audio, video, editing, and production. So let us begin with production. The very first thing that I want to talk about is organization. It is very, very, very important when it comes to filmmaking and production, because if done right, it can save you a lot of time. And this isn't just something that, you know, the most hardcore of filmmakers would want to do. This is something even the casual ones will want to do, because it will just save you a lot of painstaking hours and strenuous time that could be better spent with family, or eating, or cooking, or sitting on a couch, whatever the hell you want to do. So, let us set the scene. Imagine you were shooting a scene and you have your microphone set up, you have your camera set up so that you can capture the main footage, and then you also have backup microphones set up and a backup camera set up just in case you want to capture some funny bloopers, behind the scenes shots, or maybe your main footage just doesn't want to work. And now you have some backup just in case so that you can still put a video together. So you finish shooting, and you have everything you need on a USB or a hard drive, and now it's time to put your video together. So you plug her into a laptop and you open it up, and now you have the fun little daunting task of going through all 2 hours or plus of your footage, and you don't know what's deleting, what's a blooper, what's an actual clip you want to keep for the main video, and you have to go and sift through all of it to find out what is what. And then let's say you go through this process and it turns out you can't use your main footage because who knows. Now you have to go through all your backup microphones, all your backup cameras, and now you have to go through tons of uncut raw footage of behind the scenes shots just to figure out what is an actual clip you want to keep. And it's really not all that fun. So what's the solution? Simple. A pen and a paper. Or a phone with like a notes app, really just anything for taking notes. So just here's the solution. All right, so step 1, you are doing your very first shoot ever. So you click record, you go through it, and then you realize, I don't really like it. I don't really want to keep this. So all you need to do, take a little note, clip 1, delete. And then if you've got backup footage and you're not stopping it, you're letting it run continuously so you can capture behind the scenes, have a look at the timestamp on it. Maybe it took you 5 minutes and 26 seconds to do the first clip. So write down 5 minutes, 26 seconds right next to clip 1. Then move on to the next shoot. All right, clip 2. You shoot it and it's great, you love it, you want to keep it. So now, give it a title that is going to help you remember what this one is all about. So just your scene here, clip 2, and then once again, look at the timestamps on your backup footage and just note that down. So now it's been 9 minutes and 26 seconds. So write down 9 minutes, 26 seconds. And that way, when it comes to the editing phase, you know exactly where you need to go to find what you need. It should look something like that. I kind of forgot that part. This organization will help you when you get to the editing stage. So instead of having to guess where your clips start and end and what you need to keep, you know exactly what timestamps and what clips you need to go to for your video. And with production out of the way, it's time to move on to the one that gave me the biggest headache, the audio. Now, as mentioned in production, there might be a situation you come across where all of your main footage has been completely rendered useless. This is something I faced twice. Two things actually happened. The first of which is I found that all of my audio had just been accidentally deleted, which because I didn't have any backup audio, it rendered my video useless. How did this happen? Well, I was an idiot. So when I went to save my audio, I saved it to the wrong folder. And because of how pedantic I am about possibly corrupting all of my files, I don't like to use the drag and drop method because that is just my luck. So instead, I saved a second copy of it to the folder I actually wanted it to be in, and then I went back to the first folder to go and delete it. But before clicking the button, I contemplated existence for 10 minutes, and I came to the conclusion that there was only one way that this could go wrong. If I delete this folder, it will then also delete every single audio file in the other folder. Which is clearly ridiculous because that's the whole point of having two copies, is you can lose one and still have everything you need. So I deleted it, and then that's when I found out that my other folder had absolutely nothing in there whatsoever. Now, unless you know how file sharing works on editing programs such as Premiere Pro or Ableton Live, etc., this wouldn't make any sense to you. But let me explain. So the developers of these programs understand that when working with audio or video, storage can become a little bit of a nightmare. So for example, let's say you have a 500 megabyte video, right? And then you go and add that to a Premiere Pro editing file, and then you save it. You would expect that that file would now be 500 megabytes with a copy of your video in it. Except it won't. It's only going to be a few kilobytes. How is this possible exactly? Well, instead of Premiere Pro making a copy of your video, it actually just uses the original video and projects it into the program itself, thereby saving you space. Let's set the scene. You have two folders, right? And you have two videos. Let's say you name the first video Apples, and then you import that into Premiere Pro. What you would expect to see is something like this. But that's not what happens. Instead, it's more like this. It doesn't make a copy, it uses the first and it projects it through. Now, let's say you then use your second video and then you put it in the same folder and you also call it Apples, and then you replace the first video with the new video under Apples. What happens in Premiere Pro is it still stays as Apples, it just replaces it with the new video. So now, let's say you then take the original video you had, but now you call it Bananas, and you put it in here, right, under folder 1, but in Premiere Pro, it's not actually going to be able to show the video. If you want it to, you then need to import it into your editing file again, and then it will be more like that. So then now let's say you take Apples, right, which is now this one, you take it out of folder 1 and you put it into folder 2. What happens now? Do you think it does this? No. Because it still thinks it's in folder 1. So now it does this. And now what happens is you have a folder in Premiere Pro that's called Apples, but it's got nothing to project. And it confuses the hell out of it and it doesn't know where it is. What you need to do is you then need to delete that folder in there under Apples, and then you need to import Apples from the new folder location, and then it can do this again. Simple. And so using all this information, when I created the first save file, it took all the copies of those audios and put them into that file. And then when I saved the second copy of it, instead of creating a new copy of those same audio files, the program decided to prioritize space, and it just didn't. So when I deleted the first file, it didn't delete anything from the second file. They just didn't exist to begin with. So what is the solution for this? Well, it's actually quite simple. Don't be a pansy like me and just move it into the file you want it to be in. But make sure you do that before you go and import it all into your editing file, because otherwise you're going to have to go and import it all back in from your new file location. Now, I said I had 2 audio issues, and I'll make this second one real quick for you. So this microphone over here, right, it was just chilling it, having a good time, sipping on some pina coladas. Meanwhile, I'm over here running around like a schizo, thinking that it's actually listening to me. And because of that, I ended up with main footage audio that was very choppy and all over the place and just overall unusable. So I ended up having to use my backup audio, which I did have this time around, and that's why the audio was a little bit off. But the solution to this, which is actually quite simple, is if you are going to be moving around, just use a microphone that you can walk around with you like a dog, like I'm doing right here. I learnt my lesson. And with that out of the way, let's move on to film. I only really have one thing when it comes to the filming side of it all. If you go through the My Cinderella Story video, you'll notice that a fair few scenes, the colors don't really look natural or correct. Some whites look green and blue when everything's all over the place in some shots, and that's because of this thing called white balance. Now, white balance is basically controlled by these 2 sliders right here, which are universal to all cameras. You will find it in there, trust me. I'm not going to go into white balance right now, we'll get to that in a moment, but I'll give you a quick crash course on tint. Tint is something that you'll just have to get used to as you're in this and making videos and that. I would also recommend looking at a few more videos on it, but basically what it is a certain light source or perhaps a reflective surface will give a bit of a green or purplish tint to your film, causing colors to not look the way they should be. So if it's got a green tint over the top of a yellow, it doesn't look exactly yellow. Same thing goes for blues and reds and pinks and stuff like that. And then by using these sliders as well as the white balance up here, you can remove those green or purple tints and get a little bit closer to true white. Now with that out of the way, let's set the scene. Ow, motherfucking cow. This is because of light temperature, which is measured by what is called Kelvin. No, it's not the same thing we use in high school science to measure the boiling point of mercury. It is its own thing, with the same name as another thing that is also used to measure temperature, but it is its own thing. And if you are confused right now, you can thank the experts that created it that way. But it does get worse, because obviously those temperatures have to be just like Iceland and Greenland. One of these lights is 5600 Kelvin and the other one is 2800 Kelvin. And if it wasn't already bad enough that we decided that we wanted to give it the same name as another temperature-based measurement, of course we had to make it so that the higher the number gets, the colder the light source is, because logic! Anyway, that's light temperature. And by changing this setting on your camera, you'll be able to change the way that your colors look inside of your scene. So basically, all you have to do in order to do this is you need to match the setting temperature with the temperature of the light in the room. And then it will basically be able to match the same light or the same colors that you see in your own eyes. However, perfect white balance cannot be achieved without also adjusting the tint as well, which I'm not really going to go into because it's just, there's a lot of stuff involved with it. And if you do want to know more about white balance, I would recommend just looking into some videos yourself, because I personally don't think that true white is always the best way. I would recommend that you just play around with the settings yourself until you find a color scheme that you like and that you would like to have in your video, because honestly, it could be anything. It could just be a creative decision on your end if you want to have goofy little highlights all over the place, and that's totally fine. I don't think that the standard that the industry says of true white is the best way to go is what should generally be followed all the time. But this video, it definitely will be. Definitely. So, what do I have to say about editing? It's a short one. Try not to overload your editing files with too much information. So if you have your behind the scenes shots, your main video shots, and everything else, and then you go and throw it into one editing file onto one timeline, what's going to happen is you're going to overload it too much and it's not going to be able to run efficiently at all. It'll be freezing, it could even just crash on you, you might lose things, and it's not going to make for a very fun time. Unless you have a powerful computer that can actually deal with something like that, but most of the time you're not. So let us set the scene. Imagine an elevator with a weight limit of 500 kilograms. Now, if you stay underneath that weight limit, it's going to run perfectly fine, up and down all day long, and you're not going to have a traumatic experience. But if you overload it for some reason, then that's when you start to face issues. It might not move as fast, you might hear some noises you don't really want to hear, or if worst case scenario happens, it might crash and you lose everything. And that's the exact same way that editing files work. All right. The best way to solve this is just don't cram it all into the one space. You want to create multiple editing files. You want to create one for your bloopers, one for your main video, one for behind the scenes, and if needed, maybe even one for your final product video once you figure out all the clips you want in it. And then it's easier to navigate and things won't get overloaded. All you need to do to solve for these performance issues is just make more editing file saves. It's really just as simple as that. So instead of cramming in everything into like the one overflowed box, separate your pieces into multiple boxes. You have the same amount of information, but instead of trying to cram it into this one thing that's not going to fit it all efficiently, you can then, spread it out a little bit. Those boxes are easier to store, they're easier to use, and you can navigate in them a lot simpler. So make one for bloopers, make one for your main video stuff, make one for behind the scenes, whatnot, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But also keep in mind, if you haven't got that much of a big project, maybe a 5-minute video, you might not even need to worry about doing this to begin with. And with that, that brings us on to the last one, but certainly not the least. We've got special effects and makeup, which, in my opinion, I think I only have one real notable thing to bring up here. And, well, let's get into it. And all this one is just additional coats when painting. It's very simple, we've all heard it before, and it's really quite a lifesaver. But at the end of the day, it's up to you if you really want to do it. You don't need to add extra coats, but if you do, you need to add one coat, let it dry, then add another, let it dry, so on and so on, until you get it looking the way you want it to. But once again, if it comes down to a creative decision, kudos to you. You don't have to do it. But if you don't, it could end up looking a little something like this. And that's really it for this video. I know there are so many things that I could have talked about. Believe me, I have a very, very, very long list of all the things that I could have done better in the My Cinderella Story sitcom. But I cannot and will not go into it for literally the sake of the length of this video. So I'm gonna have to cut it there at that. If you're starting off on your first project, just like I did here, then hopefully you've learned something from this, just like I did. And as for the final part of this video that I mentioned about time and cost, for this one time, I will probably not have it in the video itself. I'll probably have it posted somewhere on the Instagram on Home Movie Empire or something, or I might post it later on YouTube or whatever the hell they call those little things where you can post on it now or somewhat. YouTube's got everything. Why? What? Make up your mind, YouTube. Anyway, so yeah, that's the video. And hope you enjoyed. See ya.